What's up, guys and gals? Red Icing Guy back again to analyze the same subject as always. Today's Persona 5 subject focuses around the weapons, armor, and attacks that can occur. Again, these are theories, so don't take any of this as concrete info, just speculation. I will present evidence, but it's still speculation. So, introduction over, let's get into the details. Weapons are a good place to start, and first, let's focus on what we already know. The new weapon system, or old depending on if you believe it's a return to the exact copy of Persona 1 and 2, includes both melee and projectile weapon. The main character has knives and pistols. Ryuji has blunt weapons like cudgels along with shotguns as his firearm, and has whips and SMGs, and Morgana has short swords and slingshots. We can expect replacing these weapons throughout the game for improved attack stats with varying accuracy as we did in previous games. For example, the main character can change out his stiletto dagger for a bowie knife at one point or another, and Ryuji can change his blunderbuss for a pump action shotgun. While on this subject, the idea of getting better melee weapons comes to mind. How far the weapons category can be stretched for each character. Ryuji's blunt weapons could involve not only cudgels, but also maces and morning stars. Morgana's short swords can include rapiers and broadswords. Just something to think about, since it's going to be boring if you move from one club to another with Ryuji. When moving to the best weapons for each character in the game, different ideas come up. When it comes to the main character, a Desert Eagle or a 44 Magnum seems to fit the bill. When it comes to Anne's whip, a Cat in Nine Tails comes up since it was so destructive to the body, it was banned as a weapon in multiple governments. If there is a katana user, Masamune and Muramasa come to mind. Moving on. Gotta get moving. So with these examples and subjects already known to most of the people watching these videos, but let's get into some theories. The first is on the subject of Yusuke. Yusuke's weapons have not been revealed yet, and some speculation has been stated to what it is. Thanks to Power Speedstar 12, who submitted a link that Yusuke's animation in the trailers depicted something of a kabuki actor. If we derive a theory based off of this, Yusuke's melee weapon will probably focus on katana type weapons. Even though I don't believe this is true, I gotta state that some people have commented that his melee weapon will be a paintbrush. That seems a little iffy, but what do I know anyways? It could be. If it is, Yusuke better have the ability to draw mustaches on the enemies for damage. A second choice for his weapon is the spears and pole arms, but that seems to be a stretch. So let's save that subject for later. As for his projectile weapon, signs pointed out to being a bow and arrow setup. Yusuke is a Garu user, so wind magic plus a longbow sounds like a good matchup. Plus, if the kabuki style of weapon choice rings true, we can expect this weapon even more, especially since Yusuke derives off of Japanese culture a bit more than the others. Look, I know some of you are saying or thinking, why projectile weapons instead of firearms? Well, if we look at Morgana and her slingshot, even though it may just be a cartoonish thing to give her, it is not a firearm. So in short, I have no positive idea about what Yusuke will use as weapons, but based off some cultural clues, he can be attributed some. This next subject is about the characters that haven't been announced and the weapons they will use. Instead of focusing on the characters, let's list off the weapon types that haven't been attributed to a person yet. What comes to mind for projectile weapons? Sniper rifles, assault rifles, crossbows, rocket launchers, and for the hell of it, let's just throw in throwing stars and throwing knives. Sniper rifles and assault rifles seem more likely. If we get a shy character, it means that the sniper rifle is way more viable. You know, it just kind of fits into the character archetype, at least in my mind. On the subject of assault rifles, as long as Anne sticks solely to SMGs and doesn't cross over into the rifle category, it is a viable weapon choice for a later character. Throwing stars and knives seems a little bit iffy and doesn't exactly fit the scheme, so we'll leave that aside as a note. Crossbows can also be viable, but without character references, it's hard to pin down. Last but not least is the rocket launcher. While it would be cool to see, it doesn't seem likely either. It would be nice to have a projectile weapon with an area effect type of attack, but upgrading it would be very hard and so late game that your already leveled up and beefy characters can surpass its usefulness. Alright, now on to melee weapons. Weapons that come to mind are spears and polearms, axes, and fist weapons. The spear polearm category can include fighting poles, spears, polearms, and long-handled scythes. Axes could be everything from hatchets to battle axes. Fist weapons can include everything from boxing gloves to tiger claws. I may be missing a category, so if anybody wants to comment on a missed weapon category, feel free to leave a comment about it. Now to move on to more important theories. After hearing about the dual weapon equipment style, my main thought was, why? How does this fit into the gameplay? Well, 3 things popped into my head. The first is enemies having certain skills that nullify one of the weapon equips. Maybe it's something similar to weapon accuracy when facing flying enemies in Final Fantasy X and 12, where only projectile weapons can hit the flying enemies, or certain melee weapons are better at hitting flying enemies. The second idea was that there could be more physical damage types. Something similar to Persona 3's Slash, Bash, and Pierce damage types. While that would be more awesome, Persona 1 and 2 fans are screaming at the screen the third and more likely scenario, an underlying grid system. This makes too much sense. Taking both melee and projectile weapons into account, a grid system could explain a lot. While not visibly apparent, an underlying scheme where distance from the enemy and dual weapon equips add up to a reasonable strategy element. Before I say some examples of this theory, I must state that they derive from video game logic and not so much on real logic. So please avoid nitpicking these examples unless you want to waste time and effort bringing up logical real-world elements into illogical video game scenarios. The first example is Ryuji's shotgun. In this example, his shotgun only gives the full damage to the enemy closest to him, and it is harder to damage further enemies because of accuracy and power loss. Then we consider Ryuji's blunt weapon. Blunt weapons require the enemy to be within melee distance, true, but blunt weapons also rely heavily on momentum. Ryuji's melee weapon may cause more damage to faraway enemies as he has to run over to them, which would build up momentum into his strike, making it hit harder. This could translate over to other characters as well. Take Anne, for instance. With whips and SMGs, she seems like a mid-range character all around. A running whip attack is too clumsy for faraway enemies, and if the enemy is too close, then there will be less damage as the middle of the whip doesn't cause as much damage to the body as the end does. Then we look at her SMGs, which historically in video games have always been a close to medium range weapon. It would have difficulty hitting farther away targets, but close and mid-range targets would have a greater chance of a successful hit and higher damage. Then if we consider that a character changes his or her weapon, it also changes their strategy. If Anne switches out her whip for a flail, she will be more effective against closer enemies. In video game logic, these weapons, both projectile and melee, could only be effective in locational manners, and when combined with enemy weaknesses, could lead to a more strategic Persona game than we have seen in the past. All I know is that there is a reason for this dual weapon system, and we will discover what it is either when the game comes out or if Atlus finally decides to release some new info. So speculation is all we have until then. One last thing before we move on to the subject of armor. In addition to the aforementioned subjects, a new type of attack has also shown up in the trailer, specifically a group attack. This clip of the party fighting some random enemies in a firing line was confusing to me at first. It's not an all-out attack, but they join together to fight solely with their projectile weapons. I thought about it for a while and came up with some ideas. Luckily, commenter Roving Rova confirmed some of my suspicions. In this group attack, which Roving Rova called random fire, the team unloads their projectile weapons into the enemy. There must be some criteria for this attack to happen. 2 ideas come to mind, and I know a lot of ideas are coming to mind in my video. I can't stop it, I'm psychotic. The first idea is a gauge that fills up, and once filled up, the team can initiate this attack. Whether or not this gauge fills and empties within a fight or carries over onto other fights is anyone's guess. If it did carry over, then the boss fights would be so much easier at the start. The second idea is that it is a random occurrence that helps you in random non-boss fights. It could happen at any point, and at least some of the fights you do while grinding would be faster and less stressful. I thought of this second idea because it seems like you would be able to cheese your way through boss fights if it was a planned occurrence. Whatever it is, I can't wait to see more of it. Well, now that weapons are out of the way, let's focus on armor. As we have only seen trailers depicting the characters in their default outfits, I do not know if changing armor will change the look of the protagonist in fighting sequences. A smarter business decision by Atlas, rather than a bonus to us gamers, is to make outfit changes a DLC sort of thing. And yes, I know that bums both you and me out. Persona 3 had an amazing way of changing outfits for the fighting sequences. But then Persona 4 didn't follow suit. When it comes to Persona 5, there is actually a reason for not changing character outfits. The Phantom Thieves have an image to uphold. As they are not only a group fighting corruption, they're also a symbol for fighting corruption. Changing the way they look would be counterproductive. If you become a symbol in this matter, you do not want to change your image in effort to not confuse the people you're trying to get the symbol out to. You never see Kaito Kid change his outfit/image because at that point it's not just an outfit, but also the image you want to portray. If anyone out there finds something else that I don't have to contradict this, I would read it happily and put it in a corrections video with a smile on my face. Let's leave this part for now and move on to the next subject when it comes to armor, because what I may say can disclaim this assumption. While in the inventory screen, we can see 3 non-weapon slots. Protector, as in armor. Accessory, well, there's no surprise there. And then, what is this?
What is that? What the f*** is that?
Clothes? What does this mean? Are the clothes for normal use, like a school uniform or a day off clothing option? Or does it completely ruin the aforementioned statements I said? I have no clue, but this clothing topic has made me interested for multiple reasons. If they are normal clothes, just walking about the day clothes, it may affect social links, as in you have to dress cool to start a social link or continue one. However, if it is a wardrobe change for the dungeons, it could mean changing outfits that have different buffs, basically turning them into visible accessories. On the other hand, this is only the inventory screen for the main character, so I have no clue about other characters and if it follows suit. If you have theories of your own about the clothes, please tell me them if I haven't covered them already, because I love learning new info even if it's just speculation. Well, with all that covered, that's it for the video. Have I missed something? Am I wrong in some way? Do you have any relevant ideas or theories of your own? Leave a comment starting with red and I will get back to you. Next week's video will be about the character origin stories before the plot of Persona 5 begins. Again, I cannot think of a closer, so goodbye.